Hello everyone, I'm Jeff Hampton with the Fulgham Law Firm. Welcome to our YouTube channel. Today I want to talk about prescription drugs, how to beat a prescription drug case in Texas. Now, if you're facing a prescription drug charge, you may have questions. What does the state of Texas have to prove? It's not as serious as like an illegal drug, is it? I mean, is there a way to dismiss this case? By the way, if you wait around to the end of this video, I'll also give you a free ebook, What to Do If You've Been Charged with a Drug Crime in Texas. All right, now let's jump into this. Now, when we think of drugs, and we think of being charged with drugs, we think of two types. We think of controlled substances, just flat out illegal drugs, and people think of it as marijuana, heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine. But then we also talk about prescription drugs. And sometimes we look at prescription drugs and we think, well, that's nowhere near as serious as the very bad drugs, right? We kind of grade them on how bad we think they are. The problem is these two types of drugs don't really have that big of a difference in the eyes of the law. They categorize them under certain groupings, and they're either misdemeanors or felonies. So many times they're treated the same as methamphetamine or cocaine, okay? So there are many scenarios where people can be arrested and charged with a crime, even if they are caught with drugs that you could get from a health professional, from your actual doctor. So and they can also be very serious. So we're going to break that down. A handful of prescription drugs double as serious controlled substances as well. Okay, so having these drugs in your possession, if you are exercising care, custody, or control over these drugs without the permission of a certified health professional, which means you had a prescription, you had a right to possess them, that is still legally a crime. It is a drug crime. So the state of Texas separates prescription drugs into different penalty groups. These are penalty categories, and these categories come with different type of sentence recommendations, different levels of offenses. So without the recommendation of a doctor, let me give you an idea. I'm assuming you don't have a prescription for these. Here's what we're looking at here. Penalty group 1 includes any type of opiates, So including Vicodin, Oxycontin, Percocet, you're talking about morphine, fentanyl, all of those examples that are opiates, those are all considered under penalty group 1. Penalty group 2, you're talking about amphetamines, quaaludes. There's a bunch of other ones on there that are even hard for you to probably pronounce on there, but you'll go back and look at those. Those are some examples of penalty group 2. Penalty group 3 are many others that people are aware of, like Xanax, Klonopin, Ritalin, barbiturates, appetite suppressants, miscellaneous anabolic steroids. That's penalty group 3. Then you get to penalty group 4. That is any compound with limited amounts of codeine, morphine, and there's a big list of other ones those are the most common ones, codeine and morphine, okay? Now these drugs, why people say, well, why would they categorize them the same level on some of these as methamphetamine or cocaine or heroin? Well, many of them have a high risk of abuse and dependence. So the state legislature looked at it and said, people get as hooked on these very bad drugs and people overdose on these drugs as much as they do on the flat out illegal substances. And so we look at it and they decide, here's how we're going to grade the level of seriousness. For example, if you're accused of possessing less than 1 gram of a controlled substance under penalty group 1, like we just discussed, that is normally what we call a state jail felony. So, by the way, that's the same thing for penalty group 1, those opiates, that's on the same level. A prescription drug there is on the same level as heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, and that is punishable by up to 2 years in a state jail facility and up to a $10,000 fine. So the same type of charges and penalties can apply if you're caught with under 28 grams of a controlled substance in penalty group 3, Xanax as a good example, if it was not prescribed to you, okay? Now, here's the next part. What if you have a lot of these things, right? What if it's not just 1 or 2 pills? If you have a large amount of prescription drugs in your possession at the time of your arrest, the police could decide to raise your charges to manufacturing or delivering of prescription medication. And those are much more serious charges. So in the example I gave you a minute ago, what would normally be possession of a controlled substance under 1 gram of an opiate if they believe you have it in baggies, or they believe you have like a scale, or if they see that you have multiple small doses of it, they could charge you with manufacturing or delivery, which raises your level of offense to now a third-degree felony, punishable by up to 10 years in prison and up to a $10,000 fine. So this is one of the things that we look at here. It's amazing to think if you have enough prescription medication in your possession, they could literally charge you with 5 to 99 years in prison. It is hypothetically possible to get a life sentence for possessing prescription drugs. So, I guess my point I'm saying is you can't take it too lightly, because they can charge you with the same level of punishment as a murder, is what we're looking at here. Okay, so now, the next point I want to talk to you about is, listen, why is this even going on? And I don't want to get into a big monologue about this, but there's a public health crisis in our country and in our state, in the state of Texas. And so what happens is many patients find themselves growing seriously dependent upon painkillers. And sometimes it's the doctor's fault. The doctor, whenever somebody gets in a car accident, will give them way too much of something, overprescribe them on it. Pretty soon they get stuck on it. It's not their fault. They don't even know how to back off of the substance, but now it's become this dependency. So what ends up happening is we find right now between 21 to 29% of all patients who are prescribed opioids, including fentanyl and Vicodin, they end up misusing and abusing the drugs. That is an astounding number of people. That's almost a third of everybody. So when they're prescribed these drugs, almost a third of everybody out there ends up abusing them. They end up getting somewhat hooked to them. So one of the common practices in this misuse is what's called doctor shopping, because these doctors will start figuring out that they're trying to get too much of it, and they'll back off. Instead of helping them, they'll just back off and say, leave them to their own devices. Well, what happens is it's the doctor shopping is the process of visiting multiple healthcare professionals to gain access to various, more quantities of prescription drugs. So here's where you can get in trouble. This ties into this, okay? If you end up forging a prescription, we find this. I've represented some really good people who got hooked on this because of no fault of their own to some type of prescription medicine. And they end up forging a prescription that they get to a doctor because they're doctor shopping. They're trying to get a prescription now so they can get access to these opiates. And then if they get caught doing that, which they almost always do, then what ends up happening is that pharmacy calls the police. Police come out. They're not being charged potentially with a third-degree felony. You were talking about now felony charges for forgery of a prescription, okay? Once again, another felony charge for a prescription medication. So remember that possession of just 1 gram of an opiate type substance can result in up to 2 years behind bars. So I think that's so important. What people need in this situation is not jail or prison. They need help. They need treatment. And so the best way to deal with that is make sure you also start talking to a skilled criminal defense lawyer in the county that you're in. And if you're in the Tarrant County, Dallas County area, North Texas area, we would be happy to help you with that here at the Fulgham Law Firm, because here's why. One of the ways you can get your prescription drug case dismissed is through diversion programs, okay? There's diversion programs in the state of, or here in the Tarrant County area specifically, that allow you to, as long as you start to get to a place where you're clean and it's not even a very intensive program, that this diversion program allows your case to be dismissed, and then you're eligible to get it expunged from your record, okay? That's really critical. And then if you were actually arrested for possession, the prosecutor may not be able to prove that you actually exercised care, custody, or control of those drugs. If that happens, that's an area that needs to be examined. So finally, I want you to understand, if there is a addiction issue going on to prescription medication, one of the best things that can be done is your attorney can go in and negotiate a way to potentially try to dismiss your case so that you or your loved one can focus on making sure rehabilitation takes place and not just punishment, okay? That's critical in this situation. So I want to thank you for joining us here today. If you want to learn more about prescription drug laws in Texas, or maybe you've got some specific questions about your case, don't hesitate to contact the Fulgham Law Firm at 817-877-3030. And by the way, I promised you if you waited around to the end of this video, I'd get you a free ebook, What to Do If You've Been Charged with a Drug Crime in Texas. Click the link below. Be happy to send it straight over to you. And thanks again for joining us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll send you more great content just like this. Take care.